Okay, so my name is Tori Roberts, and I am the archives technician for the Warren County Record Center. Today is July 10th, 2019, and I am here with Jennifer Baker, our deputy archivist, and we are doing an oral history on Maryhaven, also known as the German Orphanage and Asylum.
And my name is Katherine, Newport, go by Kit, and my maiden name was Young, and I live here in Lebanon.
Perfect. So when and where were you born? You specifically.
Well, I was actually born at Miami Valley Hospital in Dayton, but I was raised in Lebanon
Okay.
until I was 10, then we moved outside to Oregonia.
And when were you born? If you don't mind answering.
September of 1958.
Okay. So you grew up in Lebanon with us. So where all have you lived? Have you just stayed around this area?
I've lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've also lived in Bonita Springs, Florida.
Sounds pretty. So what jobs have you had over the years?
Oh, good.
You can give us a couple. You can give us a bunch. It's
Yeah,
up to you.
I was going to say when I was a kid, my first job was at Burger Chef here in Lebanon on Columbus Avenue. And then I've worked at Kings Island. And then once we moved to Florida, I was an AR clerk for an ice company. And now I'm full-time caregiver to my father.
Gotcha. So what is your dad's name?
My dad's name is Richard Charles Young.
Does he have any siblings?
Yes, he does. And their names are Adele, Sylvia,
I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna do this.
Young. Then there was my father. Then he had a sister named Frances Jean Young. And then he has a brother named, Russell Dale Young. I know him by Gus. He was also, his nickname through school was Hippo. He was the basketball star at Lebanon High at the time.
Love it. So, when was your father born? 1928?
1929.
1929. Okay.
January of 1929.
Gotcha. So, when was your grandfather born? Your father's father, who we'll be talking about.
Okay, his name is Charles Young, and he was born, they have down August 28th of 1897, but during my research, I found out he actually was born August 5th of 1897. The 28th is when they reported his birth.
Oh, gotcha. And did your I know you mentioned to us earlier your grandfather had siblings. How many siblings, and what are their names?
Okay, he had 5 siblings, and he had a brother named Miles, a sister named Ella Young. Then there was Mabel Elizabeth Young, and I'm going to screw this name up. Nevia, Neva Young, and then there was Clara Edna.
Gotcha. So that pretty much covers our general background questions. So now we'll kind of get into the actual discussions about the asylum. So when did your grandfather enter the children's home, and how long was he there?
He entered, he was signed in 1902. Him and some of his siblings. He was there approximately, at that time he was 5 years old, approximately 6 to 7 years, because at that time, I hate to use the term, but it was called farming out the children. And old Dr. Harvey that lived here in town, his brother took my grandfather out. And my grandfather stayed with them until he was 17 years old working on their farm.
We recently did research at the Historical Society, and we found a lot of people soliciting the children's home for either children to help them in the house or on their farms. So that fits.
I know 2 of his sisters that were in there, that were taken out. None of them were adopted.
Right.
Okay.
They were just taken out either to help in the house, or a family would feel sorry for them and they couldn't have kids of their own, so they would take them there. But they were all here in the Warren County area. They were all born in Lebanon, and they never left the Waynesville, Lebanon area.
Yeah, we even had an individual yesterday who we did an oral history on, not pertaining to the orphan asylum, but his father ended up actually adopting a child from Mary Haven. So, covers more people than I ever anticipated. So, did your grandfather or his siblings attend school while they were at Mary Haven, since they were right at that?
Actually, I would say that yes, because it was, pretty starch about doing that. So whatever school was here at the time, Pleasant Street or, like that. But he didn't go past the 8th grade. Most of the kids didn't go past 8th grade. As long as they were able to write their name, read, and do some math to get through life, that's about it.
So if he wasn't in school long, you may not be able to actually answer this. Was he ever singled out at school for living at the children's home, or did he face any sort of...
At that time, it was commonplace.
Okay.
So, especially with the large German community, and it's like they knew people would have so many kids, they couldn't take care of them, or like with my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather died in December of 1899, and my great-grandmother actually held on to the kids for 3 years before she ended up turning them into the orphanage. In less than a month or so after she turned them in, she passed. So it was just a sign of the times at that point.
Yeah. So, since he did have siblings who were there, did he ever mention anything about being able to see his siblings or visit with them while they were there, or were they separated?
My father's, the babies were always separated. They were put in a nursery type area to keep an eye on them, but the older kids, they interacted with each other. So that wasn't too bad because, my grandfather was born in 1897, and he had one sister that was born 2 years after him, so she was in the infant type situation.
Were you ever described the setup of the building at all? Potentially
No.
not. Okay.
No.
Do you happen to know if there was a garden?
Well, yeah, at that point in time, they had huge gardens where they canned and everything else. That's where my grandfather got the love for gardening.
We're trying to put together the setup. Like, clearly we know how the building, where that was set up, but there was a lot of land around it. So we've just been trying to kind of recreate what they did with the land, or like how big of the farm they might have
It was
had.
basically the building, barns, and farmland, because they raised their own animals. They raised their own garden. At that point in time, you didn't have the convenience of Cisco to come in and drop off food. They had to can it, and that was the kids' responsibility to take care, go out and hoe the gardens, pick the produce. They wouldn't do per se the canning. Maybe the older ones that were still out there would help with the canning, but they would do the gardening bit and coming in and snapping the beans or shelling the peas, whatever, and then turn it over to the cook staff.
Right. We've been able to put together the history of the Warren County Infirmary and the fact that that was a big farm and they produced their own food and they also sold it. But for the children's home or the asylum, it's not been as easy to find that information. So we assumed that they did that on the grounds, but we We were
can't
just,
prove it.
yeah, we were just looking
Well,
for
back
some
in,
confirmation.
from the time it was set up through the time that my grandfather would be there, yes, they would do their own stuff then. Then later on,
Right.
you know, the government got in there and was doing the Cisco and that kind of stuff. Because I actually had quite a few friends from high school that went through Mary Haven when it became that.
Okay.
Okay. So you already answered my next question of animals. Did he ever describe what the building conditions were like? Was it nice? Was it clean since it was
Their
relatively new?
jobs there, their chores there is they had to help with the cleaning. They of course had, you know, a housekeeper per se,
Mhm.
but when it came to keeping their areas clean, helping with the bathroom situation. But of course, when my grandfather was there, it was outhouses.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was separate from the house. You know, they'd
Right.
have the girls and the boys and that kind of stuff.
Right. So what other type of chores did they do besides farming and cleaning? Like, was there random things that they had to do? Like, did they also help with laundry or?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my
Okay.
knowledge. That's usually what the staff did
Okay.
because of the ramifications if a child got hurt.
That was pretty rough in late 1800s, early 1900s. Did they do the chores that they did perform on a daily or a weekly basis?
Dad was always saying that my grandfather was out in the garden, you know, from sun up to sundown through the entire spring and summer and fall. During the winter, of course, they had to continue with the animals and that kind of stuff. But the inside chores, I think it was done basically a couple of times a week. You know, they had what they called inspections, and they would go in to make sure that each child's area was clean and, you know, well kept.
So this is a new question I'm making up as I go. Did your grandfather ever say anything about how bedrooms were? Like, did he share a room with numerous kids?
Oh yeah, it was community.
Okay.
It was community, boys in one section, girls in another
Because we
section.
know later the rooms weren't quite so expansive. It was more like sectioned off and it'd be a couple kids per room. So.
Yeah, and back then there was an awful lot of German orphans in there. And they didn't do the, let's put, you know, one or two per room.
Yeah.
So,
Good to know. So what all was the asylum providing for the children? Was it providing all their clothes, their
Yes.
blankets, just everything?
they had to provide everything because the kids were there because they had nobody. So, you know, they taught the girls to sew, they would help out making clothes. Of course, the boys didn't do that. That was, at that time, beneath the male species. But, well, actually back then, the girls didn't help in the garden. That was taboo. So, and it carried over with my grandparents. My grandmother and my two aunts could go to the edge of the garden where my father, his brother, and my grandfather would have the baskets of produce there. They were never allowed to set foot in the garden.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell you why on the tape, but
That's entirely up to you.
Did your grandfather ever talk about the quality of the clothing? Or what type?
it was
No.
just basically
Okay.
work clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, they did their church services there. So they didn't go out to a traditional church and sit in a church. They did that out there, and so they didn't have to have, a nice set of clothes or anything else. They basically just had work clothes.
So was this church services within the building itself, or we've heard that there may have been a church on the premises?
That I'm not sure.
Okay.
That I'm not sure if they had a church on the premises, but in a way, I would believe that they would have and had it out there. Of course, they're going to start with them inside the facility, but as it expanded, because there was quite a few buildings out there, so there could have been one out there.
Gotcha. So if they provided clothing and shoes and all these personal items, were the children given any toys or anything that what children now would have for fun, or what did they do for fun?
Use their imagination.
We like that.
Yeah.
They didn't have they get a hula hoop and they would play their little games with sticks, rolling it and that kind of thing. But to really say that they had store-bought toys, a lot of times the girls would make dolls while they were sewing.
Were there ever any events or activities that were organized for the kids, such as a picnic or going to the fair or anything like that?
At that point in time, I'm not sure, because
Okay.
I don't think that the Warren County Fair was going at that time. It might have been, I don't
When it
know.
started?
I think it was at that time.
But it was weird. It was a different time of year than what we're accustomed
Right,
to now.
it was in September.
Yeah, that's because the festivals and fairs and things like that were set up that way for harvest.
Right. Yeah.
Because they would take their animals there to sell them.
Well, and that's the reason we included that question, is because with the infirmary, again, they would participate and show what they had grown at the infirmary at the fair each year. So, but like I said, we haven't been able to put that history together for the children's home. So,
My dad could not remember. He was very spotty, but being 90 years old, he's going to be a little spotty.
well, right, and it was just what your grandfather shared with him as well.
Yeah,
so.
and he didn't share an awful lot about his childhood because he was basically what they called an indentured servant. Because he had parents, but then, he didn't have parents, and he was just more or less farmed out to work in somebody's field. And actually, he got one of the best families in town to take him out. Like I said, old Doc Harvey's brother took him out, and he was out there until he was 17, so about 5-6 years. And that's where he got a lot of his love for this community. I mean, he was born here, but as you grow, you would want to get out of where you live.
Right.
And he never did.
Gotcha. So how did they spend holidays? Do you know?
It was just another day.
Gotcha.
They might get, little treats, a piece of candy, a piece of fruit, and they might have had a special meal. But for a holiday, it was just basically another day. They had chores they had to do on that day.
What was the staff like? Like the superintendent and the matron and the actual
My
cooking staff?
great-grandfather, my grandfather never had a bad word about anybody out there. He said they always treated him good.
Nice. So it sounds like your grandfather had a good experience, but did they have any form of discipline for the children that stood out?
He said he never witnessed it. He said he never got any beatings or anything. He was there, did what he was told to do, but you got to remember, Germans did that. They were raised very strict, very German.
So So your grandfather was linked to the family of Dr. Harvey's brother. If the individuals weren't given for farmhand to someone else in the community, did they have jobs outside, like older children? If they weren't sent out, could they like get a job
Not until they
elsewhere?
left.
Not until they left.
Not until they left, because they were more valuable to to the asylum for the sheer fact that they could run the equipment. They could work longer hours out in the gardens and take care of the animals and things like that. And most of the time, by the time they were 16, 17 years old, they were gone.
Yeah.
They left. If they were female, they met a boy, they got married. And if it was a male, he either went into service or he wanted out and wanted to go on his own.
At what age were the children allowed to leave if they wanted to?
My grandfather had said at one point in time that a little girl of the age of 13 left and got married. And
Okay.
that was quite common.
Yeah.
If they didn't like the structure, the first guy that said, "Will you marry me?" they were out the door. They thought it was going to be a better life. And 15 kids later.
Yeah, so many children. So once your grandfather left, what was his life like after living in the home? Like, did he go on? Obviously, he married. And
He went and he actually worked for the city of Lebanon. He is the city employee that graded the Lucille Berry football field.
Well, that's fun.
Got that all ready. He worked for the plating works, was a foreman of maintenance there. But my grandfather died in '56. So it was a family trait. My father at 90 actually is the oldest living young male ever.
Okay. So.
German heritage.
Yeah.
No, that's what it was, because we found out that in our family, the males have aneurysms that just sort of sneak up, mystery aneurysm. And they found it in my father. They also found his high blood pressure and his diabetes. When they found the aneurysms, they had my brothers tested and his brother tested, and his brother actually had 7 to 8 aneurysms.
I
That they were
believe that
taking.
is hereditary.
Oh, for sure.
Well, especially with the high blood pressure and the diabetes in Germans, it goes undetected. They just think that they had, a common illness, and they
Right.
just let it slide.
I'm glad they found it in your dad.
Oh, yeah.
So, your grandfather lived there from 1902 to roughly 1908-9. How long was it after he was 17 that he got married? Or just what year? Whatever's easiest.
Oh, I didn't write that one down. Let's see. They didn't get married until after he came back from the war.
Well, I was gonna ask if he served in World War I.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, I don't know, he contracted some sort of illness while he was in the service, and he was someplace for like a year or so to get over, and my grandmother waited for him, and she worked at the powder factory.
Oh.
Yeah, what a job. But she worked at the powder factory waiting for him to get done. And he come back and they were short. Let's see. My father was born in 29, that's my phone.
Okay.
It's not me.
My father was born in 29, his sister was born in 20, so 1919 is when he got married. Had to stop and think.
Do Do you happen to know if your grandfather ever ran into, in public, like, other children from the home, like, years later?
The only ones, because, you know, when he was taken out, and a few of his siblings were taken out, now he connected with them. But as far as knowing friends that he had out there, if he ran into them, my grandfather was pretty much a loner. His life revolved around his family and his work, so he might have seen them in passing or whatever.
Gotcha. What has been some of your biggest takeaways from your father talking about his father, Mary Haven? Is there any particular memories that your dad seems to share more because his father shared them more with him? Or just
My
like,
grandfather was very close-mouthed about his childhood. His world started in 1920 when my aunt was born. It was just all that. You would ask him questions. He actually died 2 years before I was born. And my mom said that when she came into the family, she would ask questions, you know, about it, and he was pretty close-lipped. My grandmother would just look at her and says, he doesn't talk.
Do you think his valuing of his family came from his time at Mary Haven?
Yeah,
or at
because
the
he saw, oh my kid. He saw what it did to the families, and, you know, when he was farmed out to the Harvey family, he didn't get to go back and see his siblings, and he actually really did not get to see them until he was older, and they had, you know, grown up to where, you know, they could meet and things like that. Because I know for the longest time, his one sister, he didn't even know what family she went to.
Oh, wow.
But if he's taken out, he's not going to, because he went to the Harveys and he stayed at the Harveys.
Right. Do you think your grandfather's time at the home, obviously it impacted the family values, did your dad then kind of keep a lot of those values and then instill them in you?
My father killed himself for the family.
So yes.
Yes. My father worked 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and gave us a core to go around, which means that we, you know, family's everything. And that's like, I take care of him. So, I mean, he's never going to go in a nursing home. I will always take care of him. He took care of me. He gave me what I needed in life, and I'm going to make sure he gets it. So
right now we're done with our listed questions. Is there anything you would like to share with us that you think would be important or interesting, or just
no,
something special?
actually, you know, like I said, I did know other people out there when it turned into Mary Haven, but, you know, teenager, the only bad thing that stands out as a friend actually committed suicide out there. And never really quite understood what it was that caused him to do it, but one day he just got up, went out, threw the rope over a beam in the barn and hung himself.
Yeah, I think we found that in our research as well.
Yeah.
That story.
But I always looked at the building going, you know, if those walls could talk and the stories that they would give. And I had always wanted to go in to see what it was like in there, see what my grandfather went through in the place. And just walk the grounds, but you could never get up there, especially after they closed it down.
Right.
But when they closed it down, it went from Mary Haven to a all boys thing.
I don't know what it was called.
It was for unruly boys, you know, the boys' home. And so, you know, and then all of a sudden it was just shut down completely.
So if you've never been inside and your grandfather was very close-mouthed about this, do you happen to know of anybody who would have photographs or anything from that time period?
If I did, you would have.
We appreciate that.
Actually, I was looking for it before I left home, and I can't remember where I placed it. I actually have part of the ledger of where my grandfather was signed in by his mother.
That's cool.
But pictures of it, you know, I would give anything.
Yeah.
Just to see how it was set up and see what he, you know, went through at that point in time.
Yeah, that is definitely one of our biggest hurdles at the moment, is trying to find some form of photographs or personal accounts or anything like that, because no one seems to have photos. We as an institution do not. We have not collected those in the past. With our new boss, she's instilling a system that we hope individuals from the community will help donate to us so we can help really preserve Warren County's history, but that hasn't been happening until she started here in 2013, so we don't have anything.
Have you talked to Mr. Zimkus?
Yes, she was there last week.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of contact.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find.
Yeah, my father had been real close friends with one of the former, I don't know what you call them.
Superintendents?
Well,
or
of the,
Oh, the Historical Society?
yeah,
They're
that there.
directors or historians. Zemkis is the historian and Vicki Van Harlingen is the director.
Okay, this gentleman had been the director and his name was Maple Dixon, Dixon Maple, sorry.
I would not have known otherwise.
But, you know, he did it, and him and Dad would sit and talk and
Mhm.
things like that. But, you know, the kids from the generation of my grandfather,
Mhm.
they don't have pictures, and most
Right.
of them are gone. I mean, it's
Right.
just my father and his brother just turned 81. So most of the ones that would have those pictures and know the value of the pictures aren't with us anymore.
Right.
And now it's the me generation, so we really don't care what happened back then. Except I've got two girls, one's 38 and one is going to be 19, and both of them know the value of family history. So,
I do feel like there's a resurgence of that,
Yes.
hopefully.
It's coming back.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
I'm 25 and I'm right there. I'm like, yeah.
I'm still prodding the 19-year-old, but the 38-year-old, she
Yeah.
likes to know where she came from, because I mean, we're eclectic, and the thing, we've got German, we've got French, we've got Irish, we've got Scottish, we've got English, we have a little bit of some sort of Jewish in there. You know, you've got all this stuff, and my oldest wants to travel to every country that we came from.
That'd be
Well, and you can actually put names to those origins as well, which is always helpful to know that stuff along with where
Yeah.
you
And
came
like
from.
knowing what section of a country you're from.
Right.
Yeah, well, my youngest, her middle name happens to be Inez. And we found an Inez in the family, and I found a picture of her.
Well, that's fun.
They look almost identical.
Wow.
I looked at that picture, and I looked at my youngest, and I looked at my picture again, and I went, wait a minute. You have Cuban in you, she doesn't. So it was the German factor.
Yeah. Well, I guess at this point, that about wraps it up. So thank you for coming to talking with us today.
No problem, I enjoyed it.
All right, thank you.